This is a great opportunity to share with you my area of expertise that I've been working on for a lot of years. I am from the USA, and that stands for my university, University of South Alabama, although a lot of people think of it as the United States of America.
USA.
Yeah, anyway, so how many of you people know where Alabama is? We got 3, 4, 5. You're not alone.
Yeah.
Most of the people in Ho Chi Minh City, which is where I was before, they had heard of Alabama, but they didn't know where it was. And I'm sorry to say that most of my students don't know where Vietnam is. So I guess we're even on that. It's very important, I think, for students and faculty and people in general to understand other cultures, and I hope that that you will enjoy the things that I'm going to talk to you about. Big data is something that I've been talking about or thinking about for many years. In fact, I started thinking about it almost 30 years ago, which was probably before most of you people were even born. You might have been something that your parents were thinking about, but they probably weren't sure exactly whether or not you were going to be here today. So the thought that I first got excited about was summarized in this initial quote up here in a book called Thriving on Chaos. And in naming the book then, I think that he thought we had a lot of chaos 30 years ago, but truthfully, I think we have more chaos today. The phrase was, we are drowning in information and we're starved for knowledge. And interestingly enough, even 30 years ago, what he said was that we have so much information, we cannot process that information, we cannot analyze it, and we can't use it to make better decision making. And his estimate was approximately 90% of all the information that we had was simply data. And of course, data is not any good unless we can convert it to knowledge, because knowledge is what helps us to make better decisions and to make progress and to move ahead. In fact, there has been a lot of data that's increasingly been generated in the last 30 years, and some scholars, not me, but some scholars other than me, have tried to estimate how much data is in fact out there today. It's difficult to be really precise, but this individual said that they think in the last 3 years or in the next 3 years, humanity will generate more data than has been generated in the last 1,000 years. You believe that? Well, I don't believe exactly that, because no one's able to really calculate exactly how much information we're going to generate. But it's true that we will, in fact, generate a lot of information that we haven't had in the past, and we will increasingly produce additional information. The thing that I thought was interesting about his comments 30 years ago was he described what was happening to data in those days. And basically what he said is in organizations, and in particularly businesses, and even in universities, a lot of that data was not being used. A lot of that data was considered to be what you might think of, at least for those of you in business, as a waste byproduct of business. And the reason it was considered to be a waste byproduct is that the cost of collection was so high and the cost of storage was so high, and there weren't many experts that had the knowledge that enabled them to actually take that information and convert it into actually usable information and ultimately knowledge. One of the predictions that he was wrong about is he said that he felt like in the future, this is starting 30 years ago, that he hoped anyway, and he predicted that we would at least be able to convert 50% of all our information into usable information and knowledge. He was wrong. He was wrong because 30 years ago, he couldn't anticipate or didn't anticipate, which is not surprising, he didn't anticipate the impact of the internet and digital data. And without the ability to, in fact, estimate the impact of the digital data, he surely couldn't have been in a position to predict much about how much of that data would, in fact, be converted to knowledge. Obviously, experts all the time make predictions, but this is one that was truly very different than what's happened, because information has continued to be produced at a large rate, exponentially, some people say, and the result is we've not made much progress in terms of processing the information that we produced. We have made a lot of progress in using the information that we have, but we can now look forward to being able to use a lot more of it in the future. One of the reasons is that, in fact, the cost of data collection is very low. The cost of storing that data is much lower than it was in the past. And increasingly, we have universities that are producing individuals that are knowledgeable about how to do that. That's going to be one of the biggest challenges in universities in the next 10 years, maybe even 15 years, because in fact, there are not enough faculty that are trained in order to train the students. And last year alone, I saw a quote that in the US, there were approximately 60,000 jobs that went unfilled in the area of data analytics. And what do you think the average salary was being offered for those? In US dollars, $220,000 a year. How many of you would like to make $220,000 a year? Yeah, me too, that's a lot of money. But I teach it, I don't make money in industry, but I still think about making money like that one of these days. So, what is big data? Do you people know what big data is? A few of you? Okay, you can't be reluctant to raise your hand if I ask you a question, because I'm going to test you some later on. Anyway, big data, a general definition is it is so much information and data that it's difficult, even with the technology that we have today, to collect it, to store it, to process it, to search through all that data, to analyze it, and then to interpret it so it becomes meaningful. In fact, there's so much data being produced that it's shaping the world around us everywhere, even here in Vietnam and in the Pacific Rim of Asia. Not just in the big countries like the US or not just in the European Union, but in fact everywhere. If we look at the economy in the US, in the past, almost all of the chief executive officers were in fact produced out of the business college. They were MBAs. Some of you have MBAs, and maybe some of you are working on an MBA, but those MBAs became the individuals who were the decision makers. As of the last time I checked, the best estimate possible was about 15% of all the CEOs in the top corporations in the US are not MBAs, and very few of them have MBAs. They're in the field of data scientists. They're called data scientists. And sadly, the business colleges have been behind a little bit in terms of producing those degrees. It is just next year that my university is starting a data analytics and particularly a marketing analytics program in our college. And that's not really too different from many universities. At the master's level, they started adding programs about 5 years ago. The best estimate I've seen recently is about 75 or 80 universities in the US now have master's programs in data analytics. But you know, there are like almost 5,000 universities in the US, and 80 out of those 5,000 have programs. There's a lot of work to be done in terms of training our students and preparing them for jobs in the future. One of the things about the data that we have is that almost all of the data that's being produced today is digital, associated with the internet. But there's a further problem with that, and that is that the data is what we call unstructured data. So what's structured data? Well, structured data is information that's already coded or already available in numbers. So do you like mathematics? Yeah. Somebody likes math. A lot of people don't like math. Well, anyway, you have to convert that information from unstructured into structured data before it can be analyzed and before it can be used for decision making. When it's converted from unstructured to structured data, that means that it can be applied to computer software programs, and you can drill down in all that data and identify the patterns that exist there that help us to make better decisions in universities and businesses and even in our personal lives. When you go on the internet or when you access the internet to a website, I'm sure all of you have seen advertisements, but you've also perhaps searched maybe for a new mobile phone or something like that, or maybe even for an airline ticket or some other device that you may want to purchase. But you didn't purchase it the first time, but within a day or 2 days, you started seeing more ads about it. And as a result of that, the big data people have been tracking you. And when they find that you're interested in something, then in fact, they want to continue to contact you until you buy it from them. Unfortunately, fortunately, I buy tickets a lot because I travel. I travel all the time. I travel usually about 200,000 miles a year. And on my primary airline, which is Delta Airline, which is a partner of your Vietnam Airlines, I have already traveled just on one airline 5 million miles in the last 30 years. So anyway, if I go online to buy a ticket, which I do obviously quite often, and I don't purchase it the first time because I'm just checking things out, but I see the price and I come back, it's almost always higher, because what they realize is that I'm interested, and in fact I'm likely to buy a ticket, and if I didn't buy it the first time, I'm probably going to come back and buy it the next time, and by then they know I'm interested. That's data analytics, and also as a specialization in the field, which is my field of marketing, it's marketing analytics. There are also jobs, by the way, since 90% of all that data is unstructured, there are lots of jobs in the field of data analytics for people who can design programs and algorithms that will enable us to accurately convert that unstructured data to structured data so it can become usable. All right, now you got to answer some questions. I'll tell you this. First off, how much information do we have today? Again, we don't know precisely, but about 4 years ago, in 2014, the experts said we had about 4.4 zettabytes. All right, who knows what a zettabyte is? You ever heard of a zettabyte? Yeah. Well, I know you've heard of a gigabyte. Maybe a terabyte? All right, well, in the last 5 years, they estimate again that it's grown about 10 times, so that by 2020, just next year, their estimate is about 44 zettabytes. So lots and lots of data. A zettabyte, by the way, is part of a category of names that the information system people have come up with to identify how much data is being produced, or perhaps how much data is available. It starts with terabytes, and then petabytes, and exabytes, and zettabytes, and the next thing is yottabytes. I know if you don't know what, and I'm not being critical, what a zettabyte is, you don't know what a yottabyte is. The truth is, I don't either. It's all an estimate, but you can be sure it's a lot of information that's out there and increasingly being produced in the future. What are the factors that are producing that? Well, a lot of them, things that you interact with every day. The websites that I talked about are producing it. If you buy something in a store or if you buy something on a website, it produces information. When you search with Google, if that's your search engine, it produces data. So those are lots of sources. As I mentioned earlier, the cost of collecting and storing data used to be so high that we couldn't collect it, too expensive, or particularly we couldn't store that data. That's changed a lot and made a huge difference in terms of our ability to store that data at a reasonable price so that it doesn't cost too much. I saw a study recently that said storing 1 megabyte of information in 1992, which is about the time I started studying this area, storing 1 megabyte was $15 US. And today, it's 3/10 of 1 penny. Wow. Really gone down. So we can collect and store a lot of information and keep it. So you search Google, well, how many searches a day? 6 billion, most recent estimated. That's a lot, but it too is increasing dramatically. Every time you use the search engine, it produces data. You use YouTube? Yeah, you know how many hours are watched on YouTube every day? 1 billion. 1 billion with a B. That's a lot of watching. But you know how much data and video is uploaded every second of every minute, every day? More than 500 hours a second are uploaded. Lots and lots of data. Everybody's on YouTube, particularly the young people these days. You have Facebook, you have Instagram, I know you do. I ask this question a lot of places. Lots and lots of pictures and other comments are being uploaded. Every one of them producing data. Data that is stored and kept and used, hopefully to make better decisions. How many people in here have been in the United Kingdom? You people need to travel a little bit more. If you've been in the United Kingdom, there are lots of cameras that are being used to take pictures every day. The best estimate is that there are, in fact, about 5 million cameras taking pictures in the UK. And if you've been in the UK, you've probably been to London, right? Well, in London alone, there are about 800,000 of those 5 million that, in fact, are taking pictures of you. I saw an estimate, the same source the other day, that said, in fact, if you walk the streets of London, your picture has been taken an estimated 200 times in a single day and put in a database and stored so that if you go there the next time, they're going to have you. The first camera that takes a picture. Who do you think has the most cameras of any country?
China.
Yeah, your neighbor up north.
Yeah.
Nobody really knows how many cameras China has, but what do you think the estimates are?
200 million.
Ah, you've been reading about it. That's the latest estimate that I heard. 200 million cameras in China. Now, China's a big country, but think about it. Supposedly, the UK is the second, so the most is 200 million, and it goes down to 5 million. We don't have nearly that many in the US, but we're catching up fast. because governments like to keep track of us too, for better or maybe for worse. Everybody has a mobile phone. Mobile phones produce lots of data. And I know there's some people out there that have at least two, and I would bet right there, okay, I bet there's somebody that's got three out there. Yeah, you may not have them all with you, but you've got multiple phones. Me, I'm part of the Apple ecosystem. I have an iPhone, I have an iPad, I have a laptop, and I have a desktop, and I use them all the time. And now Apple's trying to suck me in to pay for news, and of course music and radio and all those things. All of that produces data. So look at the number of mobile phones in India, in China, and the US. 1 billion plus in India, best estimate. 1.4 billion in China, and only 330 million in the US. But we have a much smaller population, but still, that's a lot. So if we estimate worldwide, just last year, 5 billion mobile phones, next year, 7.5 billion. I mean, it's increasing by about half in about 2 years. So, data, again, an estimate, we don't know how accurate it is. They're saying that data to the 21st century, which is where we are now, and looking to the future, is going to be to the economies globally what all automobiles and computers were last century. It's a valuable asset in organizations, and it's going to be it's essential to your economic life and to everyone's economic life. Basically, they're saying it's going to change the order in the economic situation worldwide, and that for those of you that do not have data, you will lose a source of power, and it will be, as a source of power, uncontested and very, very difficult to challenge. It therefore, assuming this is true, and I know it's really close to being true, not necessarily exact, it will in fact change the world in more ways probably than it's been changed in your life. Lots of companies up here. I'm not going to talk about all of them. I'm not even going to talk about but 2 or 3 of them. We'd be here for a long, long time. Anyway, anybody out there drink orange juice? Yeah, most of us drink orange juice. It's considered to be a healthy drink. I grew up in Orlando, Florida. What's in Orlando, Florida? Disney World. And when I grew up there was no Disney World. It was a nice little place to grow up. Population 200,000, now about 8 million, depending upon where you draw that circle and calculate that. We had a lot of orange groves in those days. And if I wanted orange juice, well, I'd get up and tell my mother I wanted orange juice, and what do you think she told me? Go out in the backyard and pull the oranges and bring them in, and you would squeeze them. Logical thing to do. Well, you may not know about it, but oranges only grow seasonally, at least they did in the US, which meant the season was about 5 months out of the year. If you were not in those 5 months, you didn't have orange juice. Minute Maid, oops, going too fast. Hope it goes back. Okay, I'll go ahead and show you. Minute Maid is owned by Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola announced in Business Week a couple of years ago that they had built the largest orange juice processing plant in the world. And the reason they did that is because they sell in over 100 countries. And if you think about orange juice, do you want your orange juice to change from time to time, or do you want it to be consistent? See, when I grew up, because oranges are different, sometimes they're sweet, sometimes they're not so sweet. Some have more pulp, some don't have as much pulp. If you're going to try to sell orange juice over time, like Coca-Cola in Minute Maid, in fact, you need to have something that's consistent. You don't want to go pour something out of a bottle and have it taste one way today and a different way tomorrow. And in those 100 different markets where it sells orange juice, there are a lot of different tastes. They indicated in that article that in preparing the different flavors and the different consistencies of orange juice, they used over 1 quintillion pieces of information. Do you know what 1 quintillion is? No, I don't know what 1 quintillion is anyway, but it is a lot. What about soft drinks? You drink soft drinks? Okay, Coca-Cola is a major manufacturer, producer of soft drinks, and so is Pepsi. Both of them U.S. companies. What do you think soft drinks are made of? Sugar, okay. Sugar, sweetened, colored, flavored, carbonated water. Yeah, it's water. They've convinced us to, in fact, consume a lot of Coca-Colas. So when we think about Coca-Colas, how many soft drinks do you think are opened worldwide every second of every minute? A lot. No, because it's only 1 second. It's 8,000 open for consumption, which may not sound like much, but think of it this way: 8,000, 16,000, 24,000. It never stops. Never stops. In fact, if you stop at one of your red lights, which a lot of them have the number of seconds calculated, if you stay there for 1 minute, it's almost 500,000 Coca-Colas are open for consumption. Obviously, Coca-Cola has been very successful through their data analytics in convincing people to consume what is in essence a drink very similar to water, but different enough to convince them that they should in fact purchase it. Data analytics has been important to all these companies, and they have been a success in many instances based upon the ability to use data. So companies have been using it, but the problem with the situation is that they're producing so much information that it continues to be difficult. But they're going to continue to increase jobs and continue to increase continue to increase jobs for our students, and we need to be sure that we prepare them for the future. What was the source of the name of Coca-Cola?
It's from Coca-Cola leaf.
Coca-Cola what?
Leaf.
Yeah, it was from the beginning when it was developed in the 1880s until 1921. It had cocaine in it. Cocaine in it, and it was named after cocaine. This is an ad from 1886 that was used to convince people to buy it. So let's look at it. It's an intellectual beverage. That's for people like you and us, right? But let's go beyond that. They call it delicious, exhilarating, refreshing, invigorating, a valuable brain tonic, and a cure for all nervous affections, including sick headache, neuralgia, hysteria, melancholy. You probably need some from having sat here all day and listened. I'm sure there were good presentations, but occasionally I too think that I would love to, in fact, have something like that legal. What do we do with that data? Well, the experts have produced, and they have also continued to expand those into areas to analyze that data. And it starts out with a concept of machine learning and ultimately decision models. The machine learning is included in that process because machines, once they're programmed with algorithms that are developed, they can do it a lot faster than we can. But the combination is a combination of humans, which produces job opportunities for students, and perhaps for those of you who work sometimes outside the universities, it produces opportunities for consulting. So they combine the machine learning, the individual learning, the artificial intelligence increasingly, and they use it as a basis of predicting what products we would be interested in purchasing and how much we might pay for them. This is an example. I like to use mobile phones because a lot of people like their mobile phones. They use them a lot, and they seem to be buying more and more of them. So this decision model talks about first purchase likelihood, and they are interested in determining how they can convince you to purchase the kind of iPhone, or, well, iPhone is one, but it could be Huawei or something else that's produced. So the companies that manufacture mobile phones, they want to know a lot about you, and the data is out there. So we talk about the idea of information search. When you search for information about the next phone you want to buy, what do? Well, the young people, they always go to the internet and they search websites. They also probably talk to their friends and their family. They also may talk to their parents, but probably not. They look at advertisements. They may, in fact, go to a store. There are lots of sources of information, and companies need to understand the process of where people search and how they search and when they search, so that they can make sure that the information about their iPhone or about their other mobile phone brand is available where they search and when they search. Of course, what you think about different brands of mobile phones is important as well. And a lot of that is based upon what your past experience is, or how much money people are spending on advertising, or perhaps even the risk associated with it, because sometimes we've bought devices, not just mobile phones, but others that we've had problems with. And so if you've had a bad experience, a company needs to know about that so that they can overcome it. So each of these green circles here represents an area of information that people are interested, that organizations are interested in, but it's not just a single source or a single attitude or a single experience. There are literally thousands of pieces of information that are incorporated into the decision models and used as a basis of strengthening the competitive power of businesses and organizations. And increasingly in academics and in universities, we need to be using those as well to develop new programs and above and beyond new programs to help our students to learn the fields that are new and emerging and that they need to be prepared for. All right, it's time for a test. I know you weren't ready for a test, but I hope you can read this. I've got 3 examples where they were written about a baseball game in the U.S. And 2 of these were written by a real person, and 1 was written by a computer. And the way it was set up is everybody was given exactly the same information, and 2 of them were written by a person and 1 by a computer. I want to know which one was written by a computer. So read it in a minute, and I'm going to ask you. All right, how many people, raise your hand, how many people think number 1 was written by a computer? All right, 1, 2, only 3. All right, so we got 3 people. Now, you people have to raise your hands, so that means we've got a lot of other people that are going to guess 2 or 3. We only got 3 people for 1. We want to try this again? Anybody else? No? All right, how about number 2? How many people think number 2? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Does that mean all the rest of you are going to say number 3?
Yeah.
All right, number 3 is all that's left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, in terms of your guesses, 3 wins. Sorry, 3 was not written by a computer. That's all right, you're like most people. It's difficult to identify the difference. Number 2 was written by a computer. For those of you, the 4 people, I think, yay! It's frightening though, if you see down here, my source was reported in 2010 in Bloomberg Business Week. That means, look what they've done in the last 9 years to improve this. You see why I'm posing the idea? If you want to be a sports writer, I'm not so sure you should. Might be fun to report on your football games, and I know you had a big one, or at least Ho Chi Minh City did last night. They partied yesterday when I was leaving. So anyway, think about what's happened in the last 10 years, and I'll also pose a question. How does this apply to you and your university? The application here is what jobs are going to go away and what jobs are going to emerge. And that's one of the things that you as students and the others as faculty, we need to think a lot about, because we talk about changing in terms of data analytics. Think about how it's changing business. All right, what are the challenges about using analytics? Well, there are lots of challenges and we're learning every day. The basic change though is that before we were using so much analytics, a lot of our decisions were based on judgment. Nothing wrong with judgment. It's important to be trained and to understand how to make good judgments. But how do you improve your judgments? Well, judgments are improved based on data. And so with data analytics, we've moved from a totally judgment-based environment and a judgment-based organization, university, business, and so forth, to asking the question, what do you really know? Or how do you know that? Which are fact-based decisions. In producing the fact-based decisions, we have the data, we have our predictive models, the algorithms, the machine learning, increasingly artificial intelligence. We have data analytics, people that are trained in that area, but there's a huge demand for additional people because we have not been producing in universities enough graduates who have the knowledge and capability to take the jobs that are available out there. We need good managers, managers who understand that in fact data analytics is really a huge opportunity to make their businesses more successful. By the way, one of the things you might be asking, does this mean that we are only going to have big businesses that can take advantage of this? Well, obviously they do have an advantage, but the smart entrepreneurs out there are producing off-the-shelf software packages to help medium-sized businesses as well. So increasingly what we're going to find is that analytics is going to be pervasive, not just in large companies, but in medium-sized companies, because they need to continue to be competitive with the larger companies as well. Finally, there are privacy issues. If you're in China with those 200 million cameras, they know a lot about what and where you're doing things. And the result is, in fact, it's sort of frightening to think about it. You know, I like Google and I've used it for years, but Google is trying to, in fact, take over our life. Because the most recent thing that they've introduced, and you may have already begun using it, is something called Google Docs. And Google Docs is a method of their collecting information as well. And what they've done with Google Docs is if you want to often open attachments, or if you want to add pictures to your picture file, you have to do that through Google Docs. Well, what if you don't want to do that through Google Docs? Well, there are some other options, but increasingly Google and other companies, Microsoft, I noticed that you're beginning to use Canvas here. what do you think the results of Canvas are going to be? Data collection, understanding about what your students are doing, what your professors are doing. That's good, but it's also a little frightening in the sense that every minute, every second, like the production of Coca-Cola, every minute, every second almost of our lives is being captured and tracked and stored. Well, let's think about the future. Data is going to continue to increase exponentially. Nothing's slowing it down. It's only getting faster. The quality of data is important, okay? And it's getting better, but that's a huge industry as well. One of the largest companies in the US that's involved in data analytics recently published the fact, or a quote, an estimate, that about 50% of their annual revenues are produced based on data cleaning. When you produce a lot of data, sometimes it comes from different sources, which means it's different in those different sources, but often there may be data missing. Or the data, like it's unstructured, may need to be converted. Anytime it's converted, it could be error prone. So data quality will improve, but that too will increasingly produce jobs for our students and for perhaps you as an individual. The analytics, the artificial intelligence, the machine learning, the algorithms, all those are going to become more powerful, and they're going to become more easier to use and more pervasive in society. And then finally, the managers that we need in organizations, you as a customer and others as customers, academics, both faculty and students, we increasingly are going to make our decisions and be impacted by data and data analytics, and hopefully that will increasingly be knowledge-based, based on converting and storing and processing additional information, which will help us in a positive way and not so much in a negative way. So thank you very much again for having me. It's been interesting and fun, and I look forward to a good time in my next couple of days here in Vietnam.
Thank you, Doctor, for your useful information. Now, I think there will be a lot of ideas and questions from guests who want to ask you. So now is questions and answer. Thưa quý vị, thì qua phần trình bày vừa rồi thì chắc hẳn là sẽ có rất nhiều những câu hỏi đặt ra cho tiến sĩ của chúng ta, đúng không ạ? Và em rất mong chờ những cánh tay của các thầy cô cũng như anh chị ạ.
So, thank you very much for your presentation. You talk a lot about big data, but I am a teacher from a high school. So I know that you in USA you will have a lot of jobs for students about data analytic and data scientists in the future. So how we can prepare for our students or for high school people for those jobs?
First, I don't know a lot about I think you're talking about K through 12, which is before university level, but so I'm not real familiar. I'm a little familiar because my wife has been in that field, but here's what I think the most important thing that you can do to prepare your students. First is that you need to communicate to your students what's happening about big data and how it's being used. And then beyond that, I think that you need to help them to understand how it's impacting their life and will continue to impact their life, and hopefully motivate some of them to choose that as a field. But probably equally important, in addition to hopefully motivating some of them to in fact learn about big data and data analytics, hopefully what you'll do is to help them to learn how it's impacting their life so that they understand the nature of data and how it's influencing our lives increasingly, and are able to adjust to that so that the outcomes are positive as opposed to negative.
Thank you. Sorry, I have two questions.
It's fine, you can have five. It's okay.
The second one is, we all know that some of the company now is using privacy information or privacy data as a source to gaining money. So for sure that well, making money is not a bad thing, but how I should tell to my students, like, because for sure that privacy issue is issue, absolutely, obviously, but in case that they can earn money from those issues, so how our students should have a judgment or see or at least a comment about those events.
Okay, that's really an important question as well, and we are now offering non-credit courses at the universities. I'm sure they're doing it in high schools as well, probably is in middle school as well. To me, the most important thing that you need to be sharing with your students is once they disclose things about themselves, whether they're putting YouTube videos up there or whether they're posting pictures or making comments on Instagram or some other website, those things are permanent. And I'll be the first one to tell you that I did things when I was a child and I did things when I was in high school and college, and I'm so glad that it was not, pictures were not taken and things were not captured. So to me, as far as privacy and thinking about the future, you need to try to educate them about what the implications are of a permanent record out there that never goes away. And cameras are fun and they're interesting and they're exciting and you record things, but once they're recorded and once they're out there, they don't go away. And increasingly we need to try to educate not just university students but much younger students, because I have a grandson who is 9 years old, and I also have a 12-year-old, but the 9-year-old is doing a lot of that now. So increasingly this is happening at a younger age, and so we as educators need to start at a younger age to try to let them know that this is something that's permanent and that they will have to deal with it because it's not going to go away.
Thank you.
Regarding big data, I have a question for you. That the more big data it is, and the more vulnerable the people will be to with the. Not only, I think your presentation is like the SWOT analysis, like strengths and opportunities, but I think we should regard to the threats instead of the threats too. Like the mentioned question that we have some kind of problems regarding privacy or identity lost. And I think big data also leads to the failure in business and politicians. Also, like for example, you remember that in Russia and America we have some kind of problem issue relating to the audio recording or the pictures that they share together in some kind of spy or something like that, and it may be lead to the collapse of the politician. And not only that one, but in businesses we have some kind of competitor, and they use the big data to against each other. So that also very big problem. So I think in the education, when the student learning about the big data, we should also integrate the threat, not only the strength but also the threat, like in SWOT analysis for these problems. Thank you. Yes.
Well, I do agree with you, and I also hesitate to think about the political aspects of it, and I'm not going to say much about it. Let me simply say this. I spent a lot of time, yes, more time on what's happening in big data, and the reason that I did is not because it's less important. We really need a balanced approach, but the fact of the matter is we're not going to stop big data, and we're not going to stop data analytics, and it's increasingly getting in politics and organizations, and so to me, it's not the kind of thing you can fight. It's the kind of thing that, for better or for worse, or whether you like it or you don't like it, you have to accept the fact that it's going to be there. But on the balance side of it, it would be nice for us to also emphasize the privacy side, but unfortunately, The money is on the opportunity of where you use it. The money is not in terms of privacy. And there are lots of negative things about privacy. So for example, 2 years ago, in 2017, the budgets prior to 2017 in U.S. organizations were primarily controlled and predominantly the result of your chief information officer. What is one of the responsibilities of your chief information officer? Protecting the data, handling it so that people can't hack into these organizations. As of 2017, the chief information officers in the U.S. had less money for their job, and more money is going to what we call line managers. What are line managers interested in? Line managers are interested in selling products. Now, you probably are looking at me and say, you're in marketing and I'm in sales, and yes, I am. So I think there are a lot of benefits because it makes business and organizations a lot more efficient in terms of having that information. But there is, in fact, a lot of misuse of it. And I don't want to talk about different countries. I don't think this is the correct platform. But, you know, there are issues that certainly we do need to address because it is a frightening side of it. But as I started out by saying, we aren't going to stop it. So what we have to do is to try to manage it as best we can.
Thank you very much.
My question for you is about machine learning. So the pace of development of machine learning in the past decade that we witnessed is mostly due to the availability of computing power. And nowadays, the application of machine learning is hungrier and hungrier for computing power. But the point is that computer is becoming intelligent, but only seemingly intelligent. It's still very far from the kind of human intelligence. So my question for you is that, in your opinion, in which direction do you think machine learning is heading? And what is your advice for us, for those who are following the research on machine learning and artificial intelligence? And another question, what do you think is the implication of quantum computer for machine learning and artificial intelligence in general? Thank you.
Well, I agree with you that machine learning has expanded, but it's going to continue to expand in the future. Artificial intelligence has a lot of potential, but it also has a lot of downsides. It's not where it needs to be. It's not where I'm happy with it. I still sometimes have to call companies and complain or try to get something fixed. And increasingly, companies have imposed on us artificial intelligence phone systems, and you can't get to a person. And I'm probably like you. I get frustrated and I'll yell at them, but it doesn't do any good to yell at a machine. So there's a lot that we need to do in terms of training artificial intelligence. But I would tell you that I don't think there's much that we can stop it, but what we can do is if we get engaged in the process, then hopefully we can make it better. As one example, I'm not sure whether, well, your religion here is Buddhist, which is fine. I'm not here to talk about religion, but I want to give you an example. In the U.S., we have lots of religions, but one of the major religions is Catholicism. We have a shortage of priests. I'm not Catholic, by the way. I'm Christian, but we have a shortage of priests, and I recently read an article that showed that robots and artificial intelligence are, in fact, now taking confessions from Catholics when they come in because they don't have enough priests to deal with it. So if we take that as one example of how it's replacing things or changing things in our lives, yes, it's a little frightening, but in some ways, if you couldn't have access to your religious individual to talk to, then maybe it's worse than at least talking to a machine if we can program those machines so that they help us. There's some other good benefits that I've read about recently. For example, we have a lot of elderly people, particularly the westernized societies. Elderly people, particularly when their significant other passes away, are lonely. And even they lose some of their friends if it's not their significant other. Then what they've developed is artificial intelligence robots to be their friends and to converse with them and so forth. So it's back to the idea that I've shared with you earlier. There are a lot of potential good benefits to it, but at the same time, there are those bad sides of it. And I would like to think that they're all what we would call unintended consequences, that people don't plan them, but sometimes those people are planning them and how they can use them in ways that you and I would not approve of, but they do. So it's like any challenges that we have in life. It's something that's moving ahead and we aren't going to stop it. And so the result is, how can we deal with it in the best way possible in order for us to at least prevent as much of the negative outcomes as possible. In terms of your quantum computing question, honestly, I read a little bit about it, but I don't know much about it. But if the potential of quantum computing is what they tell us it is, then it's going to mean that the speed of data that we produce, the speed of analytics, all the processing is just going to be that much faster and more pervasive in our lives, which means that we need to, if at all possible, get more engaged in how that process evolves over time. Because if we don't, maybe, and we've seen books that talk about it in 1984 and which has already gone past, and we're way beyond, I think, then. But the machines are going to take over. I hope they don't. I don't really think that they will, but you know, it's like I said earlier in my presentation, it's dangerous to make predictions because often predictions do come true, even if a lot of them don't come true, and I worry about that.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for sharing your experience and information. Now we would like to invite Dr. Nguyễn Kim Ánh to send the gift to Dr. Joseph here. Please welcome. Thanks again for your presentation. Thank you.
I want to see what it is. A nice pen.
Okay.
Yay.